Today I'm going to try to draw this street in Tallinn, Estonia. And this time, as opposed to the quote streets, unquote, in Krakow, it really is a street this time. There aren't any towers in sight, not today anyway. But if you know anything about Tallinn, that can't be true for long. I'm getting started here by plotting 2 points for this building on the right, the one facing forward, and I'm putting them on the right vertical third of the frame, one on the top horizontal third, the other on the bottom. These mark roughly the top and bottom of that building. I considered drawing the central building first, that bright yellow one in the middle, but I didn't know how best to estimate its size with any accuracy at all. And I wanted to make sure I didn't shove the rest of the scene off the sides if I did start with that one. It's what initially grabbed my attention, so I was eager to get it on the paper. But since this building that I'm starting with is so clear in its proportions and takes up a reasonably obvious amount of space in the frame, it made sense to me to shift my focus to that one. Starting here, keeping it off to the right side, I ensure there's some room remaining for the rest of the reference. As I go, you'll notice that I'm already spending a lot of my time on this building before moving on. And I did this for 2 reasons. For one, I guess I was feeling comfortable with that region of the paper. Not sure why, maybe because things felt like they were going well. So I wanted to keep up the momentum. And 2, because this is the only building that's facing directly forward and it's the closest, I wanted to get some of these details in before I lost track of time, as I am known to do, and mistakenly ignore them later. Everything in this reference is kind of equally important, but this building was just right there in my face, so I figured it best to give it some attention right away. Something else you'll surely notice is the framing of the right side, the video of the drawing. I move around a lot in this video. You can already see how I'm kind of veering off to the left. And that's due to my seating position, which I'm sure you're not sick of hearing about. I found the perfect place to set up for this drawing as far as comfort is concerned. And actually you can see in the left side, that little ledge, it's kind of the same on the other side. So I had a nice place to sit. But while I usually cross my legs so that I have somewhere to rest the sketchbook, I didn't need to here, which was more comfortable, but I didn't take into account how much I was shifting around over the course of the drawing. I've been telling myself I should orient the paper or pen however best suits whatever I might be drawing at that moment, but I also end up leaning this way and that way, and the sketchbook just drifts its way around the frame. So yeah, please forgive me for that one. And one last thing you also may have noticed, if so, you're really paying attention today, I appreciate it, is my stupid pen. It's been leaking ink like crazy recently, and I hate it so much. I don't know what to do about this, and Google really hasn't helped. So for now, I'm just dealing with it. You'll see I'm like making marks off to the side to kind of offload it. But in the near future, I might finally transition to the fine liner pen. It's what I've been practicing with at home, which I'm aware doesn't really make a lot of sense if I'm doing these videos with a ballpoint. But hey, who said any of this was gonna make sense? Seriously though, if you have any tips for me re the leaking, please do let me know. So I really like this reference for its light, the pale yellow buildings, and all of those windows. But on that note, I need to remind myself that what might make for a nice photo may not be the most interesting subject or scene to draw. This one, outside of those windows and very small details, was mostly about getting in the shape of the buildings themselves with reasonable accuracy. There's still some perspective issues, specifically in the rooftops, which you'll see later, but on the whole, I'm content with that. Unfortunately, I feel that a drawing like this one really begs for a ruler, at least in my case. Because the windows make up a disproportionate amount of intrigue in the reference, and they're all just a lot of, vertical and horizontal lines that tend to match up with each other. Yeah, I think a ruler probably would have helped. It's not something I really want to carry around though. But since I'm not getting the windows perfectly atop one another, they can really feel messy. My squiggly lines definitely don't help. I do try to make up for the shakiness by, like I said, adjusting my seating position or the orientation of the paper. And while that helped a little, it didn't totally fix the problem. The windows and actually the edges of the buildings as well, unfortunately, feel just off enough to throw things out of whack. So I'll need to spend some time practicing more of those boring line exercises if I'm not going to carry around a ruler. And as for the light and the colors, which are part of the reason why I really wanted to draw this, as far as those are concerned, well, I can't really do anything with those. So they're unfortunately irrelevant. Okay, so I'd like to take a minute to talk about my references. I've talked about what I'm drawn to compositionally. I've talked about this one. I've mentioned some things that maybe I like and some things that I don't. But I want to dig a little deeper into the subject and scenes that draw me in and why. The first thing I'll say is that obviously the location has some relevance as it concerns references, but maybe less so than you would think. Obviously, some things in South Korea are going to look and feel and be different from things in, I guess, Europe generally. The architecture is different. The nature might be more or less landscaped. Light can seem warmer or cooler, yada, yada, yada. Even within Europe, there could be countless differences. Coastal cities versus mountain villages, big cities versus small towns. Within a few hours, everything can change. But I think you'll find that my eye for things doesn't change as much as the settings will, as much as they're going to over this series. I've learned through photography that no matter where I go, I'm still captivated by the same category of things. For example, my photos from a place like Japan and Mexico share a lot more commonalities than you would think. Those two places, in many ways, don't share many similarities, from the outside at least. Everything from the landscape to storefronts to the way people dress, it's all wildly different. And you can feel those differences all around you when you're there. But despite that, because I'm generally drawn to the same kinds of things, the theme of my curiosity overshadows that and results in these little boxes of interest. So you might assume that if I were to do a drawing in Chicago, I'd have a hard time finding things that felt similar to those in, say, Estonia. But I think it would be easier than you think. Instead of the skyscrapers that people think of when they think about a big city like Chicago, at least that's what I think of, I'd seek out the parks, the quieter neighborhoods, the trees and facades, and, just quiet moments outside of the energy and noise of like a downtown area. Had it not been for photography, I wouldn't know this about myself, but I've been able to make these large cohesive projects spanning a variety of different locales thanks to this approach. And if I had to guess, I'd say that my drawings will follow suit. You might notice that the things I want to draw share sort of an idyllic quality. I'm more interested in trees and park benches than, I don't know, sports cars and high rises. Not to say I'll never venture outside of these little interest boxes, but their contents will undoubtedly make up most of what you'll see on this channel. I want to draw things with a serene or quaint atmosphere first and foremost. Maybe a step down the ladder from there would be, beautiful things regardless of setting, and another step down would be the best things I can find within an uncontrollable environment or something. Then finally, somewhere at the bottom, something like an academic approach to things I'm not necessarily drawn to, but feel like I should probably spend some time understanding. I find this kind of thing pretty interesting, especially from the photographic perspective. I think a lot about a person can be ascertained from what they photograph, and I'd imagine outside of that academic rung on the hierarchical ladder, the same could be said for drawing. Extrapolating on that, artists, at least casual ones, probably become proficient at drawing the things that fit into their view of the world, the scenes that align with their own dispositions. I know I seek to romanticize the world as much as I can, so in turn, I search for subjects and scenes that I feel are imbued with some romantic, some nostalgic, daydreamy, out of a novel type of aura. If I had to choose between drawing the world of a Dostoevsky novel, however dark and bleak, versus that of, let's see, like Hunter S. Thompson, however sun-bleached and full of life, I would choose the former. I would choose Dostoevsky. There's richness to both. I love them both. But I'd go for the 19th century Russian countryside and streets of St. Petersburg over, well, the raw modernism of the latter. I think you get it. On that, I don't know how, and maybe no one would care, but I'd love to throw some literary tangents in here from time to time. It's another one of my favorite things. It's probably the other thing I spend the most time doing. And that's all this channel really is, actually. It's a way for me to talk about the stuff I like through the guise of drawing. Throw your favorite book or two in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Also subscribe while you're at it. Anyway, all of that said, that underlying feeling, the magnetism to the romantic, it undoubtedly informs where I want to be, like geographically, thus informing the availability of romantic scenes. While I do think I'd still find them in a place like Chicago, I don't know why I'm picking on Chicago. It's nothing personal. I like Chicago. I'm not putting myself in positions that would necessarily require my finding them, and that brings us to Tallinn. This place is easy in that way. There's unbelievable beauty around every corner, and the city itself embodies my aforementioned preferences. I imagine that's true of where I've been and will be true of where I'll go. There will be differences, sometimes large ones, but I think the places will in part share this one commonality that will ultimately make it maximally enjoyable for my approach to drawing, which will ideally encourage me to persist even when it might be difficult or disheartening. Long story short, I want to draw pretty things, so I try to go where there are such things. Anyway, back to the drawing. I'm realizing that there's not a ton for me to do here besides get those windows and doors right, which are hard to draw precisely, as I said, so the whole thing looks pretty flat. As scary as a more complicated scene would have been, maybe one with a broader variety of shapes and angles, it might have been more exciting to attempt, giving me more to focus on broadly rather than feel left alone with the remaining horde of rectangles. I felt this struggle in a few drawings before this, namely the cafe facade from a few weeks ago on Jeju Island. But yeah, I think flat is the right word. There was something I couldn't quite put my finger on while drawing this one, like something was missing. And from my position now, watching this back, I think that something is depth of some kind. I'm not really sure how I would have applied it, but it seems to me like that might be the issue, or rather one of many issues. Also the texture on the ground, but we really don't need to spend a lot of time talking about that. My lines could unfortunately suggest any number of things due to their vagueness. Yeah, if I told you this was a canal in Venice, you could probably see it. It could also be a dirt road, who knows. I want to be able to imply that texture well enough to get the message across without getting too in the weeds of drawing individual cobblestones. Again, like everything else, if you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments. All right, so here's the final product. And while I'm not a huge fan, I don't think there's anything catastrophically wrong per se. It's pretty uninteresting. I hope that I can make these references pop a bit more in the future, get rid of that flatness, bring them out, give them like a more three-dimensional look. But I'm curious to know what you think. Let me know in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel, and please go ahead and watch every other video that I've made. That would be swell. Anyway, I appreciate you watching this one, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.